Now, from Greater Sandton and beyond, get ready for the SANDTON Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Let's do this again. It's the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and is always available as a podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. My name's Alexander Leibner. This is edition 103, and it's week 8 of 2023, and it's still February. Can you believe it? If you want to email us, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za or connect with us on social media @SANDTONTimes and visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za and send through your comments, your questions, your thoughts, your feedback. All is welcome, and it's good to have you be part of the conversation and be part of the content that we cover on this hour and so much more. As you listen from across Gauteng, South Africa, and wherever you are in the world, both on radio or as a podcast, it's your choice. All is well in Sandton land, I'm happy to report. And Vincenzo is behind the control desk again. And Vincenzo, can you believe it? This is my last show of my 30s. And next week, I'll be starting a whole new decade in life. Yep, that's it. It's my birthday on Friday, and I'm turning 40. 40. But I'm excited. I'm very excited. But don't forget to bring the balloons, Vincenzo. Bring some balloons, just to make it a bit more festive. If you're listening live on Mix 93.8 and not on the podcast, you can use the WhatsApp line. It's open. 084 822 0938. 084 822 0938. Feel free to use that and send through your messages, as so many did last week as well. And it's been a quiet week on my side, which means we can go straight into the show for this week. So let me get into it. Let me just pull up my notes here. So, coming up on this week's show, this week, the nation finds out what we will be paying more or less for and what our hard-earned tax rents will be used for as the Minister of Finance presents Budget Day 2023. And I'm going to catch up with a leading economist to preview this year's budget speech. Then, if you're into triathlons or you've never tried one before, well, how about competing by foot, on bike, or in water in one of South Africa's most desired estates? Well, I'm going to find out a bit more about that. Then next, he's advertising royalty in South Africa, and the agency that he co-founded in 1983 celebrates its 40th anniversary, and I'll be going back in time with him to where it all started. So stay tuned for that. And finally, an estate in Centurion is making the switch to solar and declaring independence from Eskom. But what will it take? All this and more coming up shortly, and as always, we'll be doing the headlines in a minute. But first, let's get the hour going, and Vincenzo, you know what to do.
Promote your brand. Advertise your business.
Our audience could be your next client. Contact the SANDTON Times today. Topical news.
My fellow South Africans.
Big names.
I love that.
The hottest entertainment.
I'll be back soon. Yeah, I'll call you myself.
And everything in between.
What an honor. I was born in Sandton, grew up in Sandton, so here I am.
This is the SANDTON Times Hour.
That's it. This is the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8 with Work With My Love by Alok and James Arthur. Sampling, notably, one of the most incredible dance tracks of our generation, the Shapeshifters' Lola's theme. And I think they've done a good job with it. So, it's time for our headlines for this week. Well, certainly the biggest trending story in Sandton this week was the AKA Memorial, which was held at the Sandton Convention Centre, and the music icon and culture figure Kenan Forbes, better known as AKA, was shot and killed outside a restaurant on Florida Road in Durban on February 10, 2023. And close to 2,000 mourners and fans occupied the venue and lined the streets of Sandton to pay their respects. And it was a very emotional memorial. I mean, if you watched it online or on TV, some incredible contributions. And it's just heartbreaking to watch a family torn apart once again by crime. And it is so high profile because AK was such a well-known person. But these memorials and these funerals are happening every single day somewhere in South Africa because someone's life has been wiped out by crime that has not been brought under control, lawlessness, and it's just heartbreaking. Then Business Tech reports Johannesburg and Tshwane speed cameras are back online. And if you didn't know, the speed cameras in and around Johannesburg and Pretoria have been offline for over 18 months. Yet now they are working again, and it might be a good idea to slow down on the roads once more. In 2022 as well, Johannesburg also introduced smart roadblocks, which use automatic number plate recognition from a company called SANDTON, I think they're the service provider, to identify drivers who had outstanding fines, cloned cars, and those with stagnant fines or fines with incorrect addresses. It looks like the technology is up and running again in and around Johannesburg and Pretoria. And finally, there was an emergency 24-hour water shutdown in Greater Sandton to repair an existing HDPE 450 millimeter pipe. I think it's one of the bigger pipes, one of the main pipes feeding water into the area. And approximately 15,000 properties were affected, but all went well according to plan, and water has been restored to the area. Let's leave it at that for the headlines for this week. The dust is settled on SONA 2023, but right around the corner is Budget Day 2023, where we get to hear how our hard-paid tax money will officially be spent and what increases are on the horizon. I'm joined by Dawie Roodt, Chief Economist of the Efficient Group, right after the break.
Connect with the Sandton Times. Email editor@sandtontimes.co.za. From Greater Sandton to the rest of the world, this is the Sandton Times Hour.
It's the Sandton Times Hour on Mix 93.8 and available on all good podcast platforms. And this week is another big week in South Africa. Budget Day is around the corner, and here to chat to me on Budget Day 2023 is Dawie Roodt. He's the Chief Economist at the Efficient Group. And Dawie, coming out of a very colourful SONA, are you expecting Budget Day to be equally as, I don't want to use the word amusing, but equally as colourful?
Well, I can tell you there's a lot that the Minister of Finance can talk about what's going on in the South African economy and what's going on in the fiscal accounts. So, yes, I think there's going to be quite a lot of information. And every year we say that the budget is going to be the most important budget for A, B, and C reasons. But I can tell you this one is an exceptionally important budget to the Minister of Finance because the South African economy is not growing. We have record high levels of unemployment and poverty. And all sort of things are going wrong in South Africa. We know we don't have electricity. We know the railroads are collapsing. Then we know the post office is collapsing. So this is going to be, if you want to use the word colorful, I guess, yes, it's going to be it's going to be a rainbow budget from that point of view, yeah.
Well, and then we're also going into an election year next year. So I'm assuming this budget is going to sort of foretell that story a bit as well.
You know, politicians, especially if there's an election around the corner, very difficult for them to take those very important political steps and political decisions and to implement those decisions. And what we need to do in the budget is that we need to spend less money. We simply cannot afford to spend so much money the way that the Minister of Finance has been spending money. But the problem is, if you spend less money, then people sort of get angry at you. And if they're angry at you, they don't vote for you. So this makes things really complicated for the Minister of Finance. And talking about the spending side, there are a couple of things that I think are very important if you look at the spending side of the budget. The one is that the President already indicated that this COVID grant, the special COVID grant, will be extended at least another year. And I think we could get some information from the Minister of Finance as far as the introduction of a more permanent kind of grant, like a basic income grant. As far as that, I think the President will indicate how far we are in the process of actually implementing a basic income grant. So this temporary grant certainly becomes permanent now. And as they usually say, there's nothing as permanent as a temporary state expense item. This is a very good example of that. And then another possibility is that the minister, and I think the president also alluded to that, there could be some sort of support for people putting solars on their roofs, which I don't think is a good idea, by the way. So that's another expense item. And then, of course, when you talk about spending more money, the Minister of Finance he indicated previously that he will take over a lot of debt from Eskom. And the question is just by how much? There's a total outstanding debt of Eskom of about 400 billion rand. This is huge numbers that we're talking about here. And I think he's going to take over, say, 200 billion or whatever from that. So that means that the state's debt, which is currently standing at approximately 70% of GDP, can go up, depending on how much it takes over, but it can go potentially up to 80% of GDP. And the rating agencies already indicated that they're very concerned because of weak economic growth. We're probably going to see a downgrade because the economy is not growing, because we don't have electricity and all that sort of bad things. And if you get another downgrade, then we're going to pay even more money if you want to borrow money. So I'm afraid we are in and a downward spiral. And we need some. The Minister of Finance needs to pull a rabbit out of a hat here to prevent this economy from slowing down even further.
It sounds like it needs more than pulling up the handbrake at this point. It sounds like it needs more like an emergency brake of some sort. And then on top of everything else, we're also facing this imminent grey listing decision in terms of South Africa's management of money laundering and other sort of notorious finances that have been going in and out of the country.
Yeah, this grey listing thing, our trade partners like the Europeans and Americans, they will decide on whether we will be put on the so-called grey list. Apart from our economy, now we do all sort of other things, like we're going on a military exercise with the Russians, and Americans don't like that, I can promise you. So I think we have to be very careful. The possibility of a grey listing certainly is there. If we do end up on the grey list, it's going to make life very difficult for us to trade internationally and to move money around from between South Africa and the rest of the world. And that in itself will be bad for economic growth. Just by the way, I think there is a possibility that we're not going to be included on a grey list, because we've put some measures in place to prevent money laundering and those sort of things. And I really do think that the Financial Action Task Force, the guys that are responsible for deciding on whether a country will be put on a grey list or not, I really think that they will really try to give us as much as possible opportunity to prevent from getting grey listed. They did warn us, and we've put some measures in place, and there is a chance that we're not going to get grey listed. But I'm afraid the risk certainly is there that we're going to get grey listed, and if that happens, I'm afraid things will get even worse.
So there could be a little bit of a silver lining, even though it's a very thin silver lining. But Dawie, I mean, this is like balancing your household budget. I mean, you can't spend more than what's coming in. Otherwise, like you said, you have to go take a loan, or you have to go take money from somewhere else to make it happen. If you had to sit in the finance minister's shoes right now and try and make a decision as to how to manage the finances of the country, what are some of the things that you would look at to try and pull the right levers?
There really is only one thing that he must do, and he must spend less money. And that's a political decision. I mean, there are a couple of places where I believe he can spend less money. Well, let's start with the president. I think the president can start showing he's interested or he's serious in cutting back on state spending by appointing a new cabinet, but a much smaller cabinet, and get rid of a number of these ministers. Like, for example, think about it. What do you think is the job of the Minister of Sport? What does he do? Or the Deputy Minister of Sport? I mean, think about what on earth is this guy doing? Is he watching TV the whole day? Do we really need that? And many other examples I can mention. So the president can start by getting rid of all these ministers and consolidating many of these various ministers' jobs, like, for example, primary and tertiary education, put it into one ministry, for example, and many other examples. So get rid of all these ministers. There are just too many of them. And it won't make much of a difference, but at least the symbolic value of that is that the minister is trying to save money. And then the president and what the Minister of Finance should do, and again, this is going to be extremely difficult because the civil servants, they already indicated that they want to go on a strike because they want more money. Civil servants, generally speaking, not all of them, but generally speaking, many civil servants in South Africa are completely overpaid, and we've got far too big a civil servant, too many people working for the state, and they're overpaid. So the Minister of Finance must somehow prove to us that he's not going to spend more on salaries on civil servants. But again, Kusatu is not going to like that, and Kusatu is very important for the tripartite alliance. So in the end, it's a political decision. So the only thing that the Minister of Finance really must do is find a way to spend less money. We cannot afford this. The tax base in South Africa is far too narrow. Too few people pay the bulk of all the taxes, and the economy is not growing fast enough to provide all these taxes to the Minister of Finance to fund all these wonderful things that he wants to spend money on. So that's the only thing. Spend less money. Find a way.
There you have it. Dawie, before I let you go, I have to ask you why you don't think it's a good idea to get a subsidy on solar panels.
Well, the answer to that is that don't you use your tax system to get people to do stuff or not to do stuff. We do use the tax system to discourage people to smoke, as an example, which is bad. I'm not arguing about smoking. The point I want to make, it's not the job of politicians to get me to smoke less. That's my decision. So that's just a bit of a moral point that I have. But apart from that, the moment you start using your tax system to get people to do stuff or not to do stuff, then that leads to what we call a non-neutrality of your tax system, and it creates all sort of opportunities. It distorts the economy, and it creates all sort of opportunities for people to misuse the system and to evade taxes in the end. So no, it's never a good idea to use your tax system to get people to do stuff or not to do stuff. If you want to use your fiscal accounts, what the Minister of Finance does, if you want to use that and you want to get people to, say, buy more solar panels, for example, a better way will be to provide a direct subsidy to that. So, and there are various reasons for that. I mean, it's more transparent and we can see what is going on, and you have to decide every year whether you want to continue with this or not. But using your tax system to get people to do stuff, it's always a bad idea.
Well, there you have it. Dawie Roodt. He is the chief economist at the Efficient Group with a quick preview of Budget Day coming up. I think it's going to be another interesting one, and we're going to be keeping a close eye on it as it unfolds and see, fingers crossed, that it's a little bit better than we hope it could possibly be. It's the bottom of the hour. We're going to take a quick musical break, and there's going to be more of the SANDTON Times Hour right after this.
Show some love.
Subscribe, share
Leave a review and rating for the SANDTON Times Hour.
on your favorite podcast app now. Back for more?
The SANDTON Times Hour continues.
You're listening to the SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8, and that was Anna Naklab, Al Farben, and You Not Us, that German band Riemann's hit single from 2000, remade, and it's called Supergirl. I don't know if you remember that, 22 years ago. Can you believe it? Taking you to the second half of the SANDTON Times Hour, my name is Alexander Leipner, and you know how this works. If there's anything that sounded good during the show, but you didn't manage to get all the details and you want to find out more, well, you can visit our show notes on sandtontimes.co.za for a detailed breakdown of everything discussed on this week's edition. Also, be sure to check out the social media accounts at SANDTON Times and feel free to engage. You can send a tweet, a DM, a voice note, whatever works for you. And you can also use the hashtag SANDTON Times Hour. Now, we get chatting about an event that's coming up. It's called the Auto and General Cross Triathlon, hosted by Steyn City. It's taking place on Saturday, 25th February. And joining me to talk about this is Fritz Pienaar. He's the owner of Advendurance. Fritz, good to have you on the SANDTON Times Hour.
Thank you. Good to be here, Alex.
Tell us a little bit more about this. I mean, a triathlon in an estate. I mean, that must be a first.
Yeah, it's not the ordinary estate. They've got a lagoon where you can swim in crystal clear water for about 350 meters. So 2 laps in the lagoon gives you a decent swimming distance. It's not really a lagoon, it's a big swimming pool. Just a massive swimming pool. So it's an incredible estate. They've got 50 kilometers worth of mountain bike trails, and then they've got ample sort of cement trails as well, which are called TBWA, which is just sort of leans itself perfectly to an event like this. Challenges with triathlons up in Gauteng is the scarcity of clean swimming water. So we saw the lagoon at Steyn City about a year ago and spoke to Steyn City and decided to do the Auto and General Cross Tri. We're obviously with Auto and General in Steyn City, and it just turned out really well. The first year we had close to 500 people. It was a sellout event. That's all we allowed into the event. And this year we sort of really upped it to about 800 people. And it's 99% sold out again. I think we've got 10 or 20 spots left.
Unbelievable. I mean, you've got 800 athletes. They swim 600 meters, and then they also ride for 30 kilometers. And then also they've got 7 kilometers of pathways they have to run. Was this a hard sell to Steyn City? I mean, I'm sure the residents weren't jumping up and down to have all these people running through their backyard, but was it a difficult sell?
No, it wasn't actually. The property is so big, the estate is so big that they've got big open spaces. It doesn't really go past the residents' properties. And then I think it's a great way to showcase what they've got at Steyn City to potential residents or potential buyers. So I think they really embraced the event, and we also love it. So it just worked out very well.
And is there anything different to this triathlon compared to triathlons that you would normally organize, or is it very, very much the same? Or does the fact that it is happening in a bit of in a sort of a recreated space, does that change things a bit?
No, it definitely changes things. The first thing I mentioned before is that you're swimming in crystal clear water, which is rare at a triathlon these days. And then it's all enclosed in a security estate. So it's obviously very secure. And then the whole mountain bike route is purposely built. So they don't take you on gravel roads, which most of the other events would incorporate normal gravel roads and sections that's maybe a bit more boring, whereas the whole track from start to finish is custom built specific mountain bike track, and it's an amazing track. So people can really look forward to a fun event. It's not easy, even though the distances might not sound in the triathlon world that long. Steyn City is sort of built in a very hilly area, so you go up or down all the time, and the cycle and the run especially is quite tough.
Apart from the distances, would you say that it is a little bit easier based on the fact that you're not having to drive on gravel roads and swim through sort of polluted water and all of that? I mean, does it make it a little bit sort of what's it called, a triathlon zero or light, based on the fact that you're not having to swallow dirty water?
Just on the swimming leg. So the swimming leg, because it's clean, and if you get tired, you can just stand up in most of the pool. Most people would be able to stand and breathe and take a breather. So, and in general, the swimming is the most intimidating part of a triathlon. So the swimming at this one, I think, is less intimidating. But then the cycling and the running, I think, is harder than most other triathlons, because the purposely built tracks is more technical. So you have to focus. It's mostly single track. You have to focus the whole time. And there's a lot of little up and downs, and it's more difficult to overtake. It's a real proper mountain bike and trail running sort of route. So that's more difficult, but the swimming is easier, yes.
Amazing. And is there anything else happening around the actual triathlon? I mean, once people finish, is there going to be some sort of music or any sort of lunch or any sort of food stalls, that kind of thing?
Yeah, definitely. People must just come and see this venue. I mean, it's like a little oasis. The big lagoon with food and drinks and slides and grass areas. It's really like, it's quite amazing to see and to witness, and there's a lot to do. From a bit of entertainment to people lounging around. Last year, I took my family and I couldn't get them home. The kids was in the pool. So after the swimming leg of the triathlon is done, I open it to spectators and to the public, and people can play and use the slides, and there's stand-up paddle boards and all sorts of stuff they can play with on the lagoon. So it's a really fun day out for everyone.
Incredible. Well, you said there's a couple of slots still left, so if there's anyone who feels like they're up for it, what do they have to do? Where do they have to go?
Just go to crosstriathlon.co.za. It's one word. From there is all the info, and there's an enter now button. And I'd just like to mention there's also options for people that's not comfortable with all three disciplines. They can do it in a team relay, so that one person swims, one rides, and one runs. And for the youngsters, the over 15 to 18-year-olds, there's a half distance. So we're doing a 300-meter swim with a 15-kilometer cycle and a 3.5-kilometer run as well, which is perfect for the youngsters.
Amazing. So we're going to put all those information up on the SANDTONTimes.co.za as well. So if you didn't manage to jot that all down, you can go in there in your own time, find all the information. But I'm sure Fritz, slots are filling up quickly. So if you've heard it and it sounds interesting, better get in there quickly. And I think there's probably even option for a team of 4. And the 4th person is the guy sitting at the end having a drink and a burger, whilst the other 3 do the running, jumping, and cycling.
Keeping the beers cold at the finish.
That's it, man. All right. Okay. I'm glad we got our priorities straight. Fritz Pienaar, it's been great to have you on. He is the man behind Advendurance and the Auto and General Cross Triathlon hosted by Steyn City. And I wish you all the best for the event. And thank you for joining us on the SANDTON Times Hour.
The best of Sandton and beyond.
You're listening to the SANDTON Times Hour.
A change of pace, and my next guest is a very special interview for so many different reasons, but I think the one that we're talking about today is the 40 years of TBWA Hunt Lascaris, one of the most notable advertising agencies in the South African landscape, and having been around for 4 decades, I mean, that is quite an impressive track record to have. You might remember some of their commercials from their early days with the mouse running on the steering wheel and the BMW steering wheel promoting power steering. And since then, there's been so many more memorable ads. I mean, to list them all, we'd be here forever. And I'm thrilled to be joined by one of the founders. Alongside John Hunt was a man called Reg Lascaris, who launched this very, very exciting advertising agency. And I'm really thrilled to be joined by him. And Reg, it's great to chat to you.
Thanks, Alexander. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Rich, what are those early memories of starting an advertising agency? Was it something that you thought you were going to do when you left school?
Well, when I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And unfortunately, I went to university, but that didn't work out that well. I lasted a couple of years there, and I thought, nah, got to do something different. And then went to look for a job. Did a few jobs I didn't really like. One was working in a mining house, which didn't kind of appeal to me and wasn't my kind of scene. And then I decided, you know what, advertising sounds good. So I went and knocked on all the advertising agency doors, and they said, what experience have you got? And I said, I've got no experience, but I'm hell of a keen. And they said, no, you got to have experience. And then I went back to one guy about 3 times, and I said, please just give me a chance. I'll work for nothing. And I did. He took me on, and I worked for nothing for 3.5 months. And then he started paying me my first salary, which was 234 Rand a month.
Amazing. Well, I suppose there's a different kind of value back then as well.
Yeah. And then I stayed with that company for a while, then did the rounds at a couple of agencies. And then one day I thought, you know what, it'd be really nice to start my own agency. I'd worked with John Hunt in another agency. And I said to him, how about starting an advertising agency? And he said, your timing's wrong because I'm going to Thailand to write a book. Okay. How long are you going to Thailand to write a book for? And he said, I'm going for a year. I said, okay, you go. And when you come back, we'll start an agency. And we did. The problem then was to try and raise some money. And we went to all the banks and they said, what collateral have you got? What guarantees have you got? And the answer was, we don't. And eventually a friend of ours lent us some money. And we opened Hunt Lascaris.
Unbelievable.
In 1983.
Unbelievable. And the rest is history, as they say. I mean, it's been 40 years of creating some unbelievable creative content across a myriad of platforms, probably platforms you couldn't even have imagined back then. Back then it was just print, TV, and radio.
Yeah, it was mostly print, TV, and radio. That was it. And outdoor. Outdoor was a growing medium. And then outdoor started splintering into all sorts of different outdoor. Yeah, and then slowly things started changing because remember when we started, I think there was one TV channel. Now there's a plethora of channels and plethora of everything. And of course, social media has gone ballistic. And now you've got AI coming into it, and you're going to have different AI channels which already started that are amazing and very interesting. So the world has changed dramatically and made it a lot more exciting.
Do you feel like it's become more difficult to be in advertising now than it was when you first started with all these platforms and all these different options that you've got?
But you've got to remember that I'm not actually in the business anymore. I was the chairman of the company until the end of last year, but I haven't worked full time for about 5 years. So I kind of physically left 5 years ago, and now doing lots of other things. But I think it must be a very exciting time to be in advertising. I really do, because, as I say, the choice of delivering mechanisms are huge. I mean, take podcasts. I mean, who'd ever heard of a podcast?
Yeah.
For example. I mean, there's so many exciting platforms, so many exciting things to do. But the one thing that hasn't changed is the power of a big idea. Because in the end, everything starts with a big idea, and then how you deliver it is the difference. Before, you still went back to the big idea and you had less choice in terms of delivery.
What are some of your fond memories of some of the brands and clients that you worked with over the years that you were active in the agency? Are there anyone that stand out that you sometimes sit on a Saturday afternoon and you go, you know what, that was such a great campaign or such a great ad that we did?
I think our big breakthrough, when we started, we had 2 small clients at the time. And fortunately, the first year we managed to break even, although we didn't draw much money. And then we started saying, okay, let's specialize. Let's try and be creative in certain areas. And radio was, as you say, a very important medium at the time. And we started writing some really kind of different radio commercials that got recognized and got a lot of awards and so on. Yeah, and we I think our first lorries, we walked the whole radio category completely, and everybody started taking notice. But our really big breakthrough came when we won BMW. BMW was our first big client and turned out to be a fantastic client, and we had so much fun with it. And then once we got BMW, we got a lot of credibility because people said, no, these guys actually are serious, if BMW can go to these guys, then, maybe we should look at them. And then touch wood, we grew and we grew and we grew. And then things started changing in South Africa for the better, as we know. And I got personally very involved in the peace accord because South Africa was on the edge. And I landed up as marketing head of the peace committee, which was a very different kind of brand to deal with. And the brief was hell of a simple: sell peace to South Africa before it explodes. And we created a peace symbol, and we managed in the end, after a year, to make the peace symbol, I don't know if you remember, you probably went around, was two doves. We managed to make the peace symbol better known than Coca-Cola, for example. And then the first election came, and we worked with Mr. Mandela on the first election, and we helped them putting the whole thing together, and from a communication point of view, ran the first election in South Africa, which was very exciting because that in itself was completely different to anything else we were doing. And that was a very, very exciting moment for us.
And very meaningful as well. I mean, talking about Nelson Mandela, I was actually going through the archives of some of the ads that you'd done over the years, and there was this one ad you did for SAA, which consisted of a good solid minute of all these politicians from around the world. I think it was Margaret Thatcher and all these guys sort of yawning at tables and sort of tired. And then right at the end, there was Nelson Mandela doing sort of this Madiba jive, and the whole sort of essence of it was, the well-rested head of state, obviously flies with SAA as opposed to all the other ones that were obviously unbelievably tired at all these negotiation tables.
We also used them in the first Cricket World Cup. When we had the Cricket World Cup here, we ended a commercial with him banging the side of the cricket ground in excitement. So he was a fantastic human being, and I was lucky enough to work with him solidly for a year before the election.
Well, it must be, Reg, a really special moment for you as well now to mark, firstly, such a great milestone for the business, but also the fact that the business is still going, it's still around, it bears your name. I mean, what a legacy to leave behind.
Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Listen, I'm immensely proud of it because I think it's when I left, we were doing really well, and then now 5-6 years later, it's still doing really, really well, and I think that's a fantastic thing. I think John and I tried to create a culture that had longevity. And I think the good news is the culture is still there and the people are still there. And we've had some fantastic people working with us over the years. I mean, people who are now world famous, people in New York, people in London, people in Australia, all over the place who've done exceptionally well. And that's why we want them all to come to this party for our 40th party, because we owe them a hell of a lot. We really do. Because in the end, you're as good as your people, and it's just been a fantastic ride.
Amazing. Well, what a point to leave it on. Congratulations to TBWA Hunt Lascaris and, of course, the founders, Reg Lascaris and John Hunt, who started it all 40 years ago. And I think what a fantastic celebration to have and to still be part of it and to see everything still flourish and grow. Unbelievable. And what an impact TBWA Hunt Lascaris has had on the South African advertising landscape. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this.
It's a good question because lots of people have asked us that, what are you going to do going forward?
That's a great question.
It's a critically important question.
Such a great and interesting question.
I have not even thought about that until you've just said it.
You're listening to the SANTON Times Hour.
This is the SANTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8. And as we almost wrap it up again for another week, that was Moby with Almost Home with Damien Gerardo, the Sebastian remix. And we go into the final minutes of this week's show, and interesting development happening up in Midstream in Centurion. If you live there, well, you know what's going on. And if you don't live there, well, we're about to find out, because they're looking to change their electricity woes and electricity sorrows and switch over to solar. But to talk about this project, I'm chatting to Jan Zeederberg. He's the founder and director of Bondev, the company that developed that whole Midstream complex. I mean, there's so many elements to it. There's retail, there's schooling, there's residential. But anyway, Jan's going to tell us all about it. Jan, talk us through this plan to take Midstream off the grid and become almost independent of electricity.
Yes, I must say, first off, we aiming as the first phase to avert load shedding stages 1 to 4. So that's the first step. Once we get into stages 5 to 8, it's a 4-hour spread. So that's a bit more difficult. And to get off the grid completely, that's probably the third step. So we're taking baby steps on this. And the plan is load shedding has been bad for everybody. And what's really happening is that the primary supply is falling away, and people are making plans to get by. They're buying inverters, they either put on the rooftop solar and all these kind of things. And we then we got the benefit of having 6,300 houses today. And we then looked and say, what can we do as a community to avert load shedding? And this is really the plan behind it, is to replace primary, which is Eskom, by a sustainable, reliable secondary. And if I can use an analogy, and it's just tongue-in-cheek, really more than anything else, I loved chutney when I was a youngster. And every now and again we ran out. So our primary supply fell away. And my mother had this plan of taking apricot jam and mixing it with Worcester sauce, and I guess it was sweet and it was black, and I ate that. And this is really where we are, there's no more chutney available at times, and we got to find a replacement. And this is really the plan we are making, is to put a proper primary in place of the primary that's falling away. And I think that in a nutshell is the plan behind it. What we must realize as a community is going to cost us a bit more money. We are already paying that money. We are already paying. Eskom has to keep the grid running. Eskom has to burn diesel. To generate electricity from diesel is costing 3 times more than what they do from coal. So as a community, we're already paying for it. And what we said in Midstream is, if we can pool all that money, put in a proper replacement primary in place, then we can all enjoy chutney for a long time and not run out from time to time. And this is really in a nutshell, the secret behind this.
Well, I love that chutney analogy. I'm going to remember that if I ever run out of chutney. There you go, apricot jam and a bit of Worcester sauce. But Jan, apart from really good recipes that you've shared with us, let's touch on the solar plan. So, how have the residences, but also the businesses at Midstream, been affected with all these rolling blackouts? I mean, this must be causing havoc, not just in households, but mostly in a lot of the shopping centres that you have in and around Midstream.
Yeah, we place generators at every shopping center. We place generators at the schools. We place generators at the retirement village. So at this stage, we are burning diesel, and we know the real cost of generating electricity from diesel. And it really adds to the cost. It adds to the cost of the center. So they haven't really been impacted negatively other than financially. And we then, when we looked at this solution going forward, and the idea is to have huge battery banks, and the battery banks will store electricity from all different sources. One of them would be solar, not predominantly. It will be predominantly solar, but it can then also be supplemented with diesel. But we've seen, if we looked at the numbers, that we can do this then at 20% of the total cost of running by diesel. And that really reduces the impact financially on everybody. It reduces the impact on the retirees, retirement villages, on the shopping centers commercially, and so forth. So the idea is, as I've mentioned, to put in the battery banks, load the battery banks either from Eskom or when we need, as most people do at home, and alternatively from solar. And maybe if I can continue, on the solar, a number of people think, and we've got 1 in 6 houses. We've got more than 1,000 houses already with rooftop solar, because we allowed them to start installing about 5 years ago, and pushing back on the grid, and then reimbursing them for the solar that's pushed or fed into the grid, as it's called. But the problem with the feed-in solar from the rooftops, you only get the excess. Once they've made food and filled their own batteries and heated the swimming pool or whatever, you only get what remains. But that's not sufficient if you want to have a new primary supply. If you want to have a new primary supply, you've got to have solar farms. So we've gone out on tender, and we've invited the big contractors to come on board and construct a solar farm on vacant land in Midstream. And that will be the primary source of feeding the batteries, because that we can do at about 80 cents, 90 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you compare that at about 8 Rand per kilowatt hour for diesel, I mean, the sums are quite easy to add up. Obviously, there's a cost in the battery, but that we can discount over 6 years, and that will be paid proportionally. The residents will only pay, they will not pay upfront, and none of their levies will be touched to do this. This whole project will be financed by Bondev, and it should be paid off by itself in 6 years' time. And people will be measured We've got an electronic measuring system that's linked to a fiber optic backbone. So we can measure the consumption for the duration of load shedding. So they will only pay during the duration of load shedding the additional cost as we need to store the energy. And this is really the plan behind this.
Are you finding that these kind of installations, these kind of plans, these kind of features as part of a property is adding tremendous value to property when people are looking to buy a house or buy into an estate?
I think in time it will be. I think it's going to have, I think for Midstream, this is going to be very positive. Obviously anybody, if you were to ask anybody if you can live without load shedding, I think most people would say, I will buy into that. The question is, what are they prepared to pay? And if you look at what we're putting on the table at Midstream, it'll cost you roughly about 2,500 Rand a year to avert up to stage 3. So over a 2-year period, about 5,000 Rand, that will be the additional cost if you're looking at stages 1, 2, and 3 to avert those stages. And we think that the value people will experience will far exceed that payment that to be made.
Well, it sounds like a really interesting plan, and I think everyone's sort of scratching their heads and deciding how are we going to deal with this, because it doesn't seem like it's going to be going away anytime soon. But Jan Zeederberg, founder and director of Bondev, looking after Midstream's energy plans for the future. I thank you for making the time to be on the SANDTON Times Hour.
Thank you. My pleasure as well. Thanks,
And that's it for another SANDTON Times Hour on Mix 93.8, and is always available as a podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify. If you want to get in touch, you can email editor@sandtontimes.co.za or connect with us on social media @SANDTON Times, or visit the website www.sandtontimes.co.za, and feel free to send through your comments, your thoughts, your questions. All is welcome. Thank you to all our guests who took the time to be with us this week, as well as Vincenzo. Thank you for pulling it all together again for another week. And the SANDTON Times team, thank you, as well as everyone at Mix 93.8. Thank you for listening, and let's connect again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the SANDTON Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.